whoever, Ray.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to the experts. There's two things that we'd like to put forward. One is that we have curtailed, cut back on the project, primarily to make it, we took out those things that we put in to make it a 50-year project or to make it expandable, and lowered the price to $139 million. And we have our lead architect here to explain to you the difference in the two proposals from 170 to 139. After that's over and any questions will be answered, we're going to turn it over to Brianna, who you all know from reporting on COVID, who's going to go over revenue projections for the new facility to show how the revenue offsets to as compared to potential bond payments. So you're on, sir.
Morning, everybody.
There's some new people, so most of us know you, but some new people don't, so. Tell us who you are, as they say in the game show.
My name is Jonathan Hawley. You can call me John. I've been asked to come this morning and give you an overview of what we did for the conceptual pricing exercise that we did back in August and September. So I'm just going to briefly run through some slides here that just to give you an overview of where we're at, and then we'll talk about how we reduce the cost. So if you could advance the slides, put it on a thumb drive so those that are on the call can see it as well. Just a quick overview of the site. We're talking about this blue parcel up here, which is out to the left of the admin building. We were asked to look at a build out, a master plan, if you will, in terms of designating what lands were available on the farm and what we could do on the blue parcel. So you're going to see some slides that have some housing in the back. That is not part of this proposal. It was part of the master plan, but not part of what we're talking about here today. You want to advance it? So this just gives you, this is the herd house in the corner, County Farm Road, steep slope headed down to the river. We lost it. I can answer some questions about. I can answer some questions about the site as well a little later, but just because it's a virgin site doesn't mean it's not without its questions and challenges down the road. We do have to do a site assessment, and I talked with Ray about that, where we have to do soils and wildlife and all the rest of those things. And in today's age, things pop up that curtail construction.
We're slightly encouraged, by that, in that when that was done for Hyder, it showed no issues.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's not the exact same parcel, but it's an adjacent parcel, so we're hoping for a similar success in the site work. Yeah.
Excuse me, Rick, when was that done?
When we built Hyder, so probably 15 years ago.
Okay, so a lot of laws have changed. since.
Yes, sir, I understand.
But the soils haven't changed.
No, sir,
No,
we haven't done anything.
it's a beautiful site. So let's go on. We can just flip through these quick. I'm just going to give you an overview of what the conceptual design was. Again, County Farm Road, County Farm Cross Road. This is the proposed nursing home, this sort of cloverleaf, three pod cloverleaf. The skirting buildings are the standalone single family residences that we talked about in the master plan. So in this particular concept, we're talking about the parking in the front and this access road that goes around the nursing home. Go ahead. Quick overview, again, not including the single family homes around the outside edge, but it gives you some sense of what this nursing home would be. We've programmed, we've done a number of nursing homes, and we've done a space program for this particular home. This represents about 231,000 square feet, laid out in 3 pods. The pods are laid out efficiently based on on staffing and resident count. So there's a balance, and all of these, units look inward to the courtyards, that they're designed around. Let's jump ahead. Quick elevations, part of the model, go ahead. A view of what the front entry would be, the sort of a grand lobby, focal point for the whole nursing home, with a porte-cochere out to the front. Go ahead.
Can we take a question?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm a little hard of hearing. Did I hear you say the nursing home you're proposing is 231,000 square
Yes.
feet?
Yep.
And it was 330?
31, we've taken 100,000 square feet out of the building.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, thank you. It'd be good if we could ask questions like this, because I wasn't sure I heard what I heard.
Yeah. I'm gonna get into a little more detail about square footage and costs as we go through.
Okay,
Sure.
thank
What-
you.
One just question on the overall design. I look at this and I say, I mean, it looks pretty, but there's an extreme amount of outdoor, wall space here. This is gonna be, how does that affect the efficiency of heating here? Rather than have, more like square type functions, each one of these has a courtyard in the middle, which means you have an enormous amount of outdoor walls. And I would think there'd be a lot, you can insulate them really well, but you're still gonna heat.
Yeah, and every resident room has to have an outside window. Every bed in every resident room has to have
That's
an outside.
wanted by law or?
That's
Yeah.
a requirement by
That is-
CMS.
That answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's, yeah, you didn't hear any of this before, but that's a reality.
This is just a view to the back, giving you some sense of scale in terms of what the nursing home would be. This is a single family house to the left. Go ahead. So I'm gonna talk a little bit here. So if you can imagine, the building layout is as if it had a walkout basement, if you would. So this is the proposed, this was basement space under the first floor, which is at grade above. This is walkout to the back, so that this is the lowest level, which would have resident rooms in that pod, and it would have laundry, kitchen, and maintenance here. This basement space here represents 80,000 square feet that we have taken out of the program. If you remember, we were talking about that being future social service
Right.
space, expansion. That will all be slab on grade now, one floor above, not occupied space. So if you can imagine, what we're talking about now is just this piece at the lowest level. If you jump to the first floor, next slide. So here, this is the entrance, the porte-cochere to the building, the three courtyards, the three pods. This is first floor. This is actually second floor. Jump to the next slide, and you're gonna see, again, resident room pods, all three designed for efficiency around staffing and resident ratios, and most of your social service, social gathering spaces around the front, that main space. Again, this is just a route plan that was developed with, to create the model, at that time. But you're gonna see one of these pods had a skylight, so it would have been enclosed. And two of them were open air. We're actually proposing to remove that skylight, so all three courtyards would be open air to the outside. Go ahead to the next slide. So these are some images that we've developed in a very short time frame in terms of images of what the space might look like. This is the front lobby, entry lobby, if you will. There's a balcony that connects the pods above. The idea here is we're gonna create a town center, we can talk about colors and finishes and all those kinds of things, but the idea here is to create a community within the building. Go ahead to another view of that same space. Again, the entrance, looking into the courtyard beyond, and the connecting balcony above. Again, looking into one of the atrium spaces, if you will, from the inside. And just images of what the inside might look like, in terms of it being set up like a town square. Look through these. Yep. This was an image that we were talking about in terms of what the resident rooms might look like. A typical bed that you would see in a nursing home, desk and a chair, window seat, some treatment of the ceilings. The idea here is not to create a hospital room, create something that feels alive, you know. These rooms are now designed per what we call FGI guidelines. Those are the guidelines that New Hampshire DHHS holds us to in terms of designing the space. And those design guidelines change every 3 years. As Ray said, every bed has to have a window directly adjacent to it. So along with other dimensional requirements for bariatric and moving of people and bringing in a lift to be able to take people out. Bathroom, access to bathrooms. The bathrooms are designed so that the bathroom is a shower unto itself. So you're not enclosed in a shower space, but within the bathroom itself, the entire floor has a drain with a curtain so that staff can come into the room and help with bathing. And I will tell you that the guidelines don't specifically require today that every room be single, but that is where it's going. And 3 years from now, my guess is FGI will require new nursing homes to be single occupancy rooms.
That's their suggested, you can always tell when they're gonna change it, because they suggested to 3 years before.
Yeah.
So it's been suggested now that any new construction be single rooms. So you know that in given a history that shows within 3 years it's coming.
This is showing, what looks like one bathroom per room per
Yes.
resident. Is that the case then?
Yeah,
There's no shared bathroom at all.
no,
In this particular scheme, we haven't worked out the exact ratios, but there might be some doubles, just because of how the nursing home operates. But the idea here is that, I'm not sure the count here, but I know in Sullivan County that we're just starting construction on, they have 4 bottoms on 1 toilet. So, you know, in terms of COVID and the other things that are going on in this world, and 30 people on the floor sharing 1 shower, you know, that those days are long since gone. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, so I'm gonna start where we were 2 months ago, just to give you an overview. As part of the partnership of the team that was hired to conceptualize this for you, we have included Harvey Construction, who's done many a project of this scale. And they did this pricing. So 2 months ago, total build out was 331,000 square feet, and we were at approximately $170 million. It gives you the breakdown here. Construction cost was construction, when I say construction, that's the building construction, was roughly 146. And then you take into account site costs, these other carrying costs, which are what we call FF&E, furniture, fixture, and equipment, the laundry, the security system, emergency generator, building cost, and an owner's contingency. One thing that we didn't have in this particular line item, and I didn't want to change the estimate, is that there's the inflation is built into this number. So at the time that we priced this 2 months ago, we were assuming we would start construction in 2 years. So that inflation is built into the $170 million. In the next estimate I'm going to show you, we pulled it all back, and then we have a line item for inflation. All of the projects that we do today have that inflation escalation contingency, simply because we don't know what the economy is going to be. We don't know material lead times, we don't know availability. There's a lot of those things. So in fairness to pricing a project, both for the owner and the contractor that you're holding him to a guaranteed maximum price, that escalation inflation contingency is used for that purpose. I'll give you an example. EPDM rubber roof. you don't pay for, I can buy it today. You don't pay for it until it ships from the factory. So I buy it day one, I don't put a roof on the building for a year later. They tell you what the price is a year later, you're gonna pay that price. That's the same thing with lighting. That's the same thing with so many things today that have, in terms of how you buy a project out, that is different than it was 5 years ago. So 2 months ago, $170 million. Jump to the next slide. I'm gonna explain to you how we got to where we are.
Mr. Holly,
Yes,
just
sir.
a quick question in terms of buying things out. Is there, if you buy it today or for a year out, are you guaranteed to get it? Or are there still, supply chain issues that might cause something to fail to show up because, because, you know, you bought it, but they haven't produced it, or they can't get it from wherever they're making it?
Yeah, there's no guarantees in life for anything. Today. No, you're not gonna get a guarantee, but the best thing that we can do is buy this as soon as we're ready to go. So the contractor, so what we're doing today, most of the contractors, including Harvey, during COVID, Harvey built a 40,000 square foot warehouse. So they buy the entire job out. You might not need rubber roofing for 2 years, but they're gonna buy it, have it shipped and store it so that it's here when you need it. When I say there's no guarantees, I will tell you stories. Couple of days ago, I got a word from an electrical contractor in Concord that was building a building, and Unitil told them 4 years to get a transformer. That sounds crazy. But what they told us was everything that they have went to Florida in the south because of damage.
Okay.
And the backup to building these are 2 years out. So to be guaranteed, you're gonna get something. Now, we work around that. There's also the issue with buying things early. You buy appliances, you know, we're gonna buy $100,000 worth of appliances. We're gonna order them day one. They're going to ship, they're gonna go into a warehouse. But they're not actually going to be used until the day you have an occupancy permit, right? 2 years later, the warranties have already run out. So what we do is we negotiate with the vendor, the KitchenAid or GE or whoever it is, and we buy an extended warranty. So they know that equipment is gonna sit stored somewhere. And then the warranty is in place from day of occupancy going forward. So the world is changing, but we're figuring out how to deal with those changes as best we can with.
There is just a little thing on the public service and the transformers. We had an electrical issue on the complex. And unbeknownst to us, except probably because it's a nursing home, they have a certain number of transformers that they put aside. Because we got a transformer here in 3 days. So, you know, I'm hoping for some form of consideration, considering what they did for us before.
Yeah, but those are for emergency uses.
I understand that.
Because nobody makes transformers in the United States, and even in the good times, it would be a year lead time, because they're almost all built to your needs. And I don't see them giving up emergency ones for a project that's doesn't house any people in it yet.
I understand. I'm just saying that, you know, we lucked out but we're not depending on that. You know, we'll start ordering in advance.
Yeah.
It was the plan.
So jump to the next slide. So I'm gonna share with you how we got, so. And these are just rounded numbers, so don't look at the exact, but this is where we were in October. Construction cost was roughly $144 million. FF&E 3.5, soft cost 14, contingency and an inflation number. Got us to $172 million, roughly 170, call it that, because I've just rounded these numbers for the presentation. Today, what we're looking at is we've reduced the construction cost from 144 to 112. Same number of rooms, so it's the same furniture, it's the same, that those numbers haven't changed. And that inflation number came down a little bit. So we're looking at 172 to 139. How did we get there? As I said, I took the 80,000 square feet of future basement out.
Right.
I arbitrarily took 20,000 square feet out of the nursing home program. So the program that we did with the county came out to roughly 251,000 square feet. I've just arbitrarily reduced that number by 20 to get us to 231. And there's no magic to it, but I'll give you the comparison. Merrimack County Nursing Home, when we did that in 2008, was a few more beds, 235,000 square feet. So we're in the ballpark. We haven't designed anything, exactly. So there's room for us to work with that, and I think I could find 20,000 square feet of savings, if you will, in space.
One of the ways in which we've talked about it is for all of you who've been on a delegation and know that our linen laundry is done at the jail. So some of that 20,000 square feet can come out of laundry. Because it's, located somewhere else on the complex. And we don't have any reason to change that at all. I mean, we have a small area for laundry now for the residents' clothes. But
It's just Ray and I haven't sat down and talked about this exact specifics. I'm just using my knowledge of other county facilities going forward. And making those comparisons. Sullivan moved laundry to the jail, and then in this project, they're moving it out of the jail back into the nursing home. So go figure. So the loop road around the building right now was designed as a two-way public street to accommodate the future housing in the back of the lot. We've reduced that road to a 12-foot lane, fire lane, one way. So we still can come in, we still can have access, we can still do deliveries to the program. But you come in one side, you go out the other way.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, telehealth, have we taken telehealth out of the equation? No, how about, is this stick built and steel or what?
It's gonna be a steel frame building. A nursing home has a certain level of importance to it that the building code has to meet. And it makes sense for it to be concrete or deck floors, steel frame, infill of light gauge metal framing. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Question,
Go ahead.
Is the fire department gonna be okay with a 12-foot wide?
Yes, that's the only requirement. That's the minimum requirement. The road, the two-way road was actually for the future. Yeah. Yes, sir.
This is probably a small thing. Well, the kitchen, I guess it's $1 million for kitchen equipment and appliances, so I guess that's other appliances, but if you move some of the equipment from the old building, first of all, that's gonna be much closer to its when it has to be replaced, but also there's an opportunity, and there's probably a little bit of a cost of moving it, but is there an opportunity, there's significant opportunity cost of not being able to sell the old equipment from the old
our current kitchen equipment's about 15 years old.
Yeah.
So in 5 years, it's gonna be 20.
Yeah.
So we'd probably be looking at replacing, quite a bit of that. So rather than, come back to the delegation and say, well, we thought we could move this equipment, but now it's failed and we wanted to be sure that we put in an adequate amount of money. Because it's been I've been here 35 years, we replaced it once. So, it's over 15 years now.
just moving the freezer could cause it to fail.
Absolutely.
And to move any of the
cost
equipment.
is not worth it, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's value if you have a giant mixer or something like that we can move, but the truth is, there's no street value. You would have to pay somebody
Okay,
to
right.
remove it,
Yes.
not, nobody's gonna buy it and come and get it, that kind of thing. Yes, sir.
Hope I missed something, but these single family homes, how many are there? Are they part of this total cost?
They are not.
No,
They're not part of it.
It's not part of the project. Tom.
Honestly speaking, we were hoping to make revenue off the possibility of those homes being developed. So it would be something that we would do an RFP to look for an outside developer. We wouldn't have anything to do with it. And we, it fits into the kind of aging in place situation that we've been promoting and keeping people out of nursing homes. And it engages the telehealth concept that we've been talking about, where when 1 out of 6 people 65 and over go to the doctor on a routine basis, which we learned from running the IDN. You know, we hope that having services available like telehealth in the nursing home and having people living on the curtilage, which we would actually get revenue from, although we're not counting that revenue as part of the offset to the bond. We feel that, you know, we could work with a contractor. In fact, several contractors have already approached us to build that area outside the curtilage. And we could anticipate revenue for the county for, you know, having that. So that's part of why we developed a 2-lane road in the back. Now, what'll have to be done with the 2-lane road is, as anybody develops that area, they're just gonna have to put the second lane in it and make it a 2-lane road.
So who would own that property?
The county would continue to own it. We'd have some kind of lease arrangement similar to what we originally did with Hyder, with Hyder House when Hyder was built. And Covered Bridge Manor too. And Covered Bridge Manor also, you know, the elderly housing that's up on the hill. You know, we would own it, but we would lease the land as part of the development. And, you know, my position is that if the developer is getting the land for free, you know, then we would obviously collect an annual income from that. Although we have not counted that in as any revenue, because again, it's not part of the project that we're asking you to approve.
Go ahead, Cliff first. And then you.
What's the savings to not do the full road now, approximately in dollars,
Probably $250,000.
$250,000?
I'm literally picking that number out of.
Yeah, because
I don't-
you seem to be cutting the road down to a marginal size, and Tim, I'm sure has a concern. The concern I've got when you start adding on, now you're disrupting anybody that's in the nursing home, because when you build a road right next to a building, it's not quiet. So
No,
I'm
but-
wondering if that's something that we should say, you know what,
Go for the road.
we gotta build the whole road, so that part is done, so if we go forward with it.
Well, we can certainly have we can certainly offer a number for the road, come Monday.
Right, that would.
My question about the fire department, because from years on the planning board in Rochester, I know the fire department in Rochester would never approve a 12-foot wide road around anything, because they won't drive their trucks on anything that narrow. It's gotta be 20 feet.
Yeah, I
wide for
think
Rochester.
that's important to factor in.
So maybe, you know, different circumstances, but
We'll have a different, we'll have a number for you,
Yeah.
come Monday.
Yes, Mike. hold on.
Well, just a couple of questions. It says water service connection fees, disconnect old services. So this assumes that the existing nursing home is no longer gonna have water and storage.
No, we're not doing anything we're not touching the old home.
Is this just a generic statement when you talk about
Yes.
disconnecting old
Yeah.
services? Okay, so will the city of Dover water and storage? Okay, and what are the impact fees? It says off-site impact fees,
So,
$500,000.
We haven't, well, it's rolled into that whole number. The utilities, the water main coming in, the
So
sewer
this is
main
a
coming
separate
in.
line item. It talks about
So
impact fees, like $500,000.
there's, it's an allowance that we've talked through, but we haven't actually gone to Dover to talk about, you know, every county that I've been involved with has dealt with where they are in different ways. In Unity, we're
No, I
using,
guess, I'm sorry, let me interrupt, but I'm trying to figure out what impact, is this impact fees to the city of Dover for building something?
go ahead, yes.
I can answer.
Yeah.
The city of Dover has impact. City of Dover has tie-in. Okay, and the city of Dover has, when you go to, go to get a building permit, they're gonna require a percentage of that, whatever the total cost is, you have to pay the city of Dover. So all those fees, unless we're in a position of negotiating this, some of them away with the municipality.
And we have
Which
been
is the process.
successful in that in the past.
So, but the cost of the building permit, all those things are gonna be, would have to be negotiated with the city of Dover. I can tell you it costs $10,000 a time, a single family home in the city of Dover. Okay? All right, and that's just plain facts. That would have to all be negotiated.
On the other hand, we were kind enough to allow Dover to cut through our property.
Right.
Tie in the sewer line, cutting it back a higher. And so I think there might be, there might be some, well, we didn't. But there might be, on the other hand, they allowed us to run our gas line across their walking bridge, so. But there might be some quid pro quo.
Sure,
That
trade-off.
we might be able to lessen that number, but I think it would be disingenuous of us to not put something in there. And then have to come back to you guys and say, well, it didn't, our negotiations didn't work out.
You can't pretend that that aspect doesn't exist.
That's the point in that.
Go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, there are a couple of stumble points going forward, dealing with demographics and workforce housing. And have you given any consideration to providing housing for staff, especially the LNAs, the people with don't have children and so forth that are on site? That would be a real attractant to a lot of, to bringing in staff, which seems to be one of the main stumbling points right now, right?
That was one of the ideas about building the houses on the curtilage, is that, if we're, again, it goes back to the fact that if we're giving the land, or, through a lease to an entity, there's several options that the county has talked about, but because it's not really part of this project, I don't have a definitive answer. One of the options is to make housing available, for staff, one option at a lower rent figure, considering we start our nurses' aides at $16 an hour. Okay, which we hope to adjust, but the new delegation will have the opportunity to talk about that. That's one of the options. The other option is to offer lower rents to people based on income, similar to what's done with the housing authorities. And to also generate revenue by making market level housing. So it's gonna be some combination of those ideas, which of course has to go through the delegation. We'd be sharing that information with the delegation, because as you know, by statute, you need to approve our leases. But these are all of the things that we talked about. And again, the building around the curtilage is a future project that won't involve any county funds. But yields opportunities for county benefit. Whether it be housing like you just discussed, whether it would be helping people who make now $800 or $900 in Social Security, and that's their sole income, and they can't find a place to rent for under $2,000. Or
Right, don't forget the spouses.
and
Spouses of the people.
the other part of this is we have a number of spouses who live independently, and I'm sure would love to rent, close by so that they can come and visit their husband or wife who might be in the nursing home. So all of those things we've talked about, but we've kind of put off because none of them make any difference if we don't have a nursing home.
Go ahead, Mac. Go ahead.
Policy, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the answer is no, and the second thing is that right now you have 70% occupancy roughly, based on the amount of staffing that you can provide.
That's
Demographics going forward do not recommend that we're going to do better going into the future, although the circumstances of nursing there would be more pleasant. Why are we settled in on 215? Why not 150?
Well, first of all, 215 is our licensed beds. what we have now, and we don't want to give up a license, although that's really a poor answer. The real answer is, if you look at history, and I'll look at Professor Soloway to help us here. If you look at the history of nursing, and this young lady is the classic example. Why don't you explain your situation?
Over the years, what I've noticed is the ebb and flow of the healthcare industry, especially with nursing. Myself personally, I entered nursing school between 2009 and 2010. We had a huge nursing shortage nationwide. Went into nursing knowing that when I got out of nursing school, I was gonna be able to find a job. By 2012, my final semester, ladies from the graduating class prior to me came in and said, now there's a nursing surplus. No one's hiring anyone unless you've had experience, you've had, on the job training. So coming out of nursing school was that surplus. 2002 to 2003, other individuals that worked there were in the same situation. They entered nursing school because of the nursing shortage. When they were coming out of nursing school, we saw a nursing surplus. We started seeing this trend prior to COVID that it was going to dip. No doubt in my mind that the healthcare industry, because it's one of those industries that will continue to need people, will continue to survive. As other industries start to fall, we're going to see a rise in those individuals coming out of there. I truly believe that this is that 10-year ebb and flow, and we're just in the dip of that staffing right now.
Thank you.
The other,
I'd like to comment that the general demographics of this country, you need 2.1 births per fertile woman. They maintain a population. We're at 1.6, 1.1 in China. It's 1.3 in Europe. Our populations are crashing and the expenses of living in our technical society are rising. There is a good reason to think about having, an on-site staffing thing for people that are single. And, if you want to staff 215 beds, then I suggest that should be part of the plan. Far more important than a solar plan.
well, you'll have every opportunity to, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, it's not like
I
you,
know.
but you'll certainly have the opportunity to review those types of things as they come up. In terms of how we lease out those 120, 150 units. But I think Professor Soloway, you're on, sir, to help us with this answer.
We are in a very interesting demographic shift. Yes, indeed, our replacement levels, our birth replacement levels are dropping. Regrettably, what that means for thee and me, my kind friend, are that we're going to age out, and there will be fewer young people coming into service industries to care for us. It is absolutely imperative, again, for thee and me, sir, to have a plan that takes us out 20 to 30 years. And to be prepared for it. We are facing what Commissioner McLaren called a while ago the silver tsunami. And that is where our population in New Hampshire generally and on the seacoast locally are going to age dramatically. In addition, you've all seen it, there is a homeless wave headed our way. People are being forced out of Portsmouth by the construction of luxury condos where there was once low-income housing. That population has tried to move to Dover. Those luxury condos are now being built in Dover, and that population is moving to Somersworth, and it's going to get pushed out of Somersworth as well. People are going to be pushed out by a declining economy. They're going to wind up unable to meet rents. They're going to become homeless. We have to plan for that now. At the same time, I regret to inform you, the problem of substance dependency is not going to go away. And we have to be aware that we're going to have people camped, I do mean camped, under our bridges in our open field who are drug dependent, who are homeless, and somehow we have to prepare for that. Finally, the level of medical complexity that's falling out on the nursing homes is really dramatic to watch. Our nursing homes are being asked to do so much more than they ever did before in terms of medical complexity. We have to plan for that now. As I look at this, I believe that about a month ago, we had a plan before us that frankly was expensive. It was expensive. However, our county has been remarkably responsible in keeping tax burden on our constituents under control. And it was a forward-looking plan. We were planning for the silver tsunami, we were planning for the homeless, planning for the drug dependent, planning for the medical complexities that we were going to face. And I think that this proposal, though it is politically expedient, is going to, in 20 years, is gonna come back and bite us in the butt. We're not gonna be as prepared for it as we needed to be. We have an opportunity now to approve a forward-looking program, and I hate to see us constrict that down for political expediency.
Mike first and then Matt.
Yeah, we're looking at this, obviously, the footprint of per resident is gonna be larger, one per room with their own bathroom. That's gonna be quite a change from what we have now. I'm assuming this building will be air conditioned.
Yes,
So I have to assume then the cost per resident of utilities is gonna be up substantially because they're gonna have more room, they're gonna have their own bathroom, and they're gonna be air conditioned. So what's the plan for heating the building and what's the plan for electricity? I know you mentioned something about solar, but I don't see any specifics.
Yeah, we're working with George. This has been George's situation.
First of all, there's two things. Number one, we're gonna research the idea of having geothermal. in terms of-
Right now, it's down to 0.
I understand. The solar component is tied to hopefully a project in cooperation with the city of Dover. We have a plan to put 70 acres into production. As a result of the latest bill that was passed by Congress, there are a number of private sector companies across the country who have gotten huge tax incentives to build solar.
It's billions.
Yeah, it is, it's in the billions. So initially, the thought process prior to this bill passing was the county was gonna look at operating the solar farm on its own. That has shifted now as a result of this bill, where they've given huge tax incentives to the private sector to construct, and also put incentives there. Let me give you an example.
Mhm.
If you buy solar panels from a manufacturer in the United States, you get an additional 10% tax write-off. If you buy the steel from the United States, company, the steel from the United States, you get an additional 10%. I'm talking about for the private sector. There's an immediate 30% tax incentive to just even start the farm. So you've got these conglomerates being formed across the country who are putting in massive solar projects out west and in the Midwest. I'm talking 15,000 acres, 20,000 acres, because they have millionaires who want to invest in it simply because they're getting huge tax breaks. So the city of Dover with the Tolan Road landfill, which is adjacent to our 70 acres, I've been in discussions with the city of Dover, talking about constructing a larger solar complex in cooperation with the city of Dover, creating conservation areas in this town of Madbury around the Bellamy Reservoir to protect the water supply there, okay? And as a result of the technology that we have now, I produce 1 kilowatt, I think, Mike, on like 6 acres, 5 to 6 acres of land. The technology is hugely advanced, even in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of production capacity.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last bit.
I'm talking about a kilowatt per hour generation on the number of acres you need to generate 1 kilowatt.
You get about,
They're talking about between 5 and 6 acres.
about, 5 and 6 acres will not get you, you get more than the kilowatt, maybe, it won't get you a megawatt. I don't know if you're confusing your terms.
But yeah, I'm sorry.
A megawatt takes
I'm talking about
somewhere
megawatt,
around 40 acres
Right,
for 5 megawatts, so. you
right.
can
That's
do the math.
correct. That's right.
So,
And that's the area we have in the back.
That's the area we have in the back. So anyway, with that potential solar farm usage, we, based on what the consultants have told me, and since that bill's passed, and of course, the word's got out that we were interested in Minnesota, we've been contacted by 20 firms that want to do this. So it's not like there's a limit on our end as to, there's only one player in town. We got 20 different investment firms that want to invest in this thing. The question will be whether or not we go in partnership with the city of Dover. That's another discussion that will have to happen with the county delegation, because again, we can't enter into any kind of agreement like that long term without.
But I guess my question is, right now, as proposed, what's the heating and cooling system? How much is the electricity load going to be? And are you just gonna buy it from Eversource? I mean, this is
That
all
was the
nice
plan.
in the future. What's built into
No.
this bill? This third, this whatever is $139 million. What's the heating source?
The heating source hasn't been designed yet. I mean,
So we don't even know what it's gonna cost.
yeah,
Is there a line item in here that covers it?
yes, there is.
Where is that line item?
I can share with you after the entire estimate that was done by Harvey. So we're taking projects of comparable size and comparable complexity, carrying what those costs were for the mechanical systems into this. Now, it could be fossil fuel, it could be geothermal, it could be a combination of different things. We're not there yet. I mean,
Okay, well, there's a huge difference in capital costs. For example, if you're gonna go with oil heat versus geothermal, which geothermal will probably save you money in the long run, your operating costs, but it's gonna be much higher capital cost. We're talking capital costs today, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. There's a line for geothermal on here, but it says zero.
it says zero.
There's a line for solar, it says zero.
Well, let me just throw this in right at the moment, because the Community Power Coalition, it currently has about 20 New Hampshire communities that are on board. Cliff, you know about this? The Community Power, Dover is one of them. They have hired a new whiz bang from UNH, a young guy. And so a lot of communities are jumping in on the idea of doing things like solar and geothermal and so forth. And so the city of Dover, I don't know about Rochester. Do you know, Cliff?
Not that anything has been discussed.
Well, I haven't examined that, but anyway. So you had a question, I
Yeah,
know.
I did. So is it safe to say, when I reviewed the old minutes and said project that has been approved, like the solar farm, what's been approved is the concept and to go forward with looking into it, not in essence, any solar farm of any size or anything, because I don't recall ever approving any exact solar farm.
No, you didn't, you didn't.
Okay, so it's just the concept. Thank you.
Just the concept.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
excuse me. go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
Well, one of the things I'd like to see is that, given the change in the footprint per resident, we can say is gonna be pretty substantial. I think now we have sharing rooms and sharing bathrooms and so forth. Adding in the air conditioning load. Presumably the systems are gonna be more efficient and buildings are gonna be better insulated. So going forward, what are we looking at as a change in overall utility costs? Is it gonna be 10% higher per month? Is it gonna be 10% lower? Because that's a substantial number. And this, like I said, this is capital cost, but we also need estimated carrying costs going forward.
It's a complicated
I know it is, it's very
issue
complicated.
for me to answer today. I mean, if you decide to go with the solar farm and you have that electricity available, that sort of pushes us into heat pumps and things that are driven by electricity, so we have to have a lot of conversation about systems as this progresses forward. It's a very important issue that you raised.
It's sort of like when you buy a car, you know how many miles per gallon you get, because that has a big effect on how much you're willing to pay for the car. Absolutely.
So, one factor in terms of the cost of electricity going forward, the proper baseline is probably not whatever the default rate at Eversource is, because, as we heard earlier, the county does a very good job of sourcing the electricity from a third-party supplier at a significantly lower rate than whatever Eversource is charging. So, for instance, we've got what, 7 cents per kilowatt hour for the next year, as opposed to 22 or whatever they're going to go up to in February. So we can And it's pretty consistent that whatever the default rate is, if you are a large enough entity, you can bid something better than the default rate. So I think that also should play into the decision of, are we gonna use something based on electricity versus fossil fuel? And
I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a complicated discussion, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the information you're giving us. I realize you're trying to work on a certain framework to bring the cost down to satisfy those who were so concerned about the initial cost. I noticed right off the bat, geothermal did have a $0 next to it. I hope this is not just a feel-good line item. I hope that there will be serious intention. This community coalition or whatever it's called, everything I've read about it so far is focused on solar energy, and I understand that. You can share that, but with geothermal, you can't. It's site exclusive. How can we move forward to get some kind of concept about geothermal energy for this particular project? Because this is very important and will save us money in the long term. What can you offer? So it's complicated, but it's also part of this, and we need to have some concept of what we need to face.
Yeah.
And I know it will cost more than what you've got down here right now, but we need something.
Geothermal is a premium.
Mhm.
I do have some experience when we did the Merrimack County Nursing Home. That's a complete geothermal. But let me explain to you. Well, the technology in 2008, when we built Merrimack, is different than it is today. When we did that, we planned for 30 1,500-foot wells. 30. Part of the problem is you don't know what you have for quantity and quality of water until you start drilling the well. We ended up with 16 wells total to service the whole building. So we hit an aquifer and the wells talk to each other. So the water coming in and out is 50 degrees. There's no shift. There's no up, even with the heat load going back in the ground, there's no change. You don't know that until you start drilling those wells. You're in a comparable site. This parcel of land is adjacent to the river. There is an aquifer. I don't know how much. But we've got to figure that out. To draw a parallel, I'm in the middle of the Rockingham Municipal Complex and redoing one of their community wells. It's a gravel packed well. We drilled 4 test wells within 100 feet of where we ended up, and we got no water. We got a well that produces 200 gallons a minute. In this particular, it's a vein that runs right like a highway right through the middle, but 50 feet on either side, there's no water. So until we drill the wells, we can design for a geothermal. And there's a lot of, when you design that, the systems go with it. And we would, if we go down that road, we would probably do a number of test wells early before we complete the design of the mechanical system, simply to know that we have the water. The technology today, though, is a little bit different. It was open wells in 2008. Today, they talk about closed loop wells. And the difference with closed loop wells is that you don't go deep. So you have 3 times as many, they call them geoballs, or they're like a gravel packed well where they're closed loop, nothing leaves the pipe. And those systems need, it's a little bit different. So there's some design exercise that needs to happen here before we make that. I just wanted you all to know, I was asked to get this price down as low as I could without compromising the program. And that's where we are. So right now, it doesn't include geothermal.
Yes, if we decided to move forward, even if it was in steps, when you do the site work, at that time, could it be determined if geothermal is a possibility?
Yes, yeah.
And so
We would probably do 2 test wells and we would do test pumping. So basically we draw the water out of the ground for 24 hours to see, and we measure the other well. So if the other well stays constantly where it is, and we don't draw it down, we know we have the amount of water that we need to run the system.
follow-up, so realistically, what you've said is we're not there yet. And we are not there yet. And hopefully some of you realize that now, that we're not there yet. And it's impossible for you to be held to too much because we're not there yet. So if we did this in possible steps where we maybe said, okay, let's go on for the site work and the construction and more to get more finite numbers. And let's look at all the options. But it would seem to me the site work would be critical, so we know what we're facing. When we did the jail, it came back to bite us in the butt because we didn't do good site work when we found the ground was contaminated with gasoline. And that was another 300 grand, which was a lot of money 20-something years ago. So as we move forward, I would encourage the members of this delegation to say, you know, I'm not in disagreement. We gotta do something. What we do should be based on what we have for facts, and moving forward, we should determine how to move forward. I love the idea of geothermal. I think we're crazy not to somehow make sure we can get that in there, and if we can, and the rest of it is quite frankly confusing when you mention the solar farm and all this and that deal, because no deals have been made with any city I know of. With Rochester at the meeting that you were at, George. That meeting agenda said, talk about the heating, the warming home. Yeah, nothing in the agenda about the new nursing home or any of that. So that hasn't really been discussed. But I like the idea of the workshops. These are so wonderful because we're really, I think we're learning so much. And I think it really helps the partisanship because as we go, we begin to know where the other person is coming from and what they feel like. And everybody, I think, has had good points. We've all brought good things, and there's a lot of stuff we're together on.
So can I just finish this and show you where we're
I will,
at?
yeah,
And then I have a recommendation for you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the remaining issues that came out of the program, we reduced the kitchen equipment allowance in half. We talked about that. Where the current proposal at 139 is a standalone building. We're not tying into security system for the whole farm. We're not tying into the fire alarm for the whole farm. It's a standalone system. There's cost associated with trying to tie it into a complex, if you will. And the bigger one is we've eliminated George's early ask that the building be expandable. So we had always talked about, we could add an extra floor, or we could build out horizontally, or we could add a fourth pod. We've taken all of that out of the original design to scale this down. We talk about cautions, we talk about the economy, we talk about, I will tell you that every contractor I'm talking to in New England is talking about a percentage point a month in terms of inflation, 10 to 12% over a year. So my point here is that the price today might be a sour pill. You just don't like it. But I will tell you, a year from now, that pill is going to be bigger. That the price is not going to come down. I'll give you a couple of comparisons. In 2008, we did Merrimack County Nursing Home. It was almost exactly the same size. The construction cost was $40 million. 12 years later, 14 years later, it's 3 times the cost. We're doing 110,000 square feet at Rockingham. We're in the same ballpark of square footage. We're doing 85,000 square feet of new at Sullivan County. It's the same cost. What I'm telling you is, this is the cost that Harvey is saying they're willing to enter into a guaranteed maximum price going forward, and we're gonna design to that. Okay? So, but there's a lot of assumptions with that. We have a lot of things that we need to do. There's a lot of things, there's things that we don't know. I don't know what I don't know at this point, there are hurdles that need to be, that we need to get over. We need to permit this. We need to talk it through with the locals. If you jump to the next one, which is my last slide, I'll just share with you we've gotten the building down to approximately 112 million dollars. We're carrying roughly $8 million in inflation. That's $8 million for buyout over the next 5 years. It's 2 years of design and 3 years of construction. And we've adjusted all of the numbers along the way. I mean, that's my biggest point here. And I'll leave you with this. When we did Sullivan County, we designed it and completed the design 3 years ago. The delegation changed. And they second guessed every decision that was made with the prior group. They created a committee, they went back and they reviewed everything. It took them 16 months. And ultimately they came back and decided, you know what? The plan on the table is the best choice. They talked about moving the home to Claremont. They talked about building a new home in the field across the street. They talked about mothballing the old, I mean, they talked through everything. And now we're into a new delegation. That project they could have bought that project 20 months ago for $45 million. They just signed an agreement with Harvey Construction for close to $78 million. It almost doubled in 20 months. If you guys kick this can down the road, it's gonna cost more. That's what it's gonna do. It's gonna cost more. You have to put faith that we have a program, we have a concept that has been vetted. We know what the program is for the nursing home, and we need to design to that number. That's what needs to happen. You need to if it's not me, it's gonna be somebody else, but you need to let these guys design this and move it forward. And this is the best price you're going to get. I guarantee you that going forward.
Mike.
Well, one comment, I noticed on your line item on the project soft cost allowances, line item 3, it says geotech boring allowance, 125,000.
Yeah.
So there is something in there for, I assume that's, I don't know what geotech means.
Geotech is basically we have to do a number of borings to determine the capacity of the structural
Okay, so they have
capacity of the
nothing
site.
to do with power or heat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, you mentioned something about a guaranteed price. Is this, did I hear that correctly?
This is the
Guaranteed
best
maximum
budget,
price?
this is the best budget that we have for what we have drawn here. You're getting a number based on a lot of assumptions and a lot of allowances. So as we refine this and we design this, part of the conversation is having Harvey at the table to say, all right, you want to go to geothermal. We're talking to a geothermal contractor. What's that budget? What's the difference between a fossil fuel system? The premium, that premium is $3 million. So it's not that you can hold Harvey to the number of what we know today.
But there
as
is
we
no
design-
guarantee on this price. This is your best estimate at the time. And this is subject to change as things get more specifics get specified.
Exactly,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
I think my biggest concern is that we've taken the ability to expand out of the equation. And I think it's a big mistake for us to do that. Because we're gonna be sitting here in 5 to 10 years, and it's gonna cost us
Not me.
4 or 5 times. I'm saying collectively, whatever, but I'm just saying, take the expandability out, and then we're up against the wall, and 5 or 10 years from now, we're gonna be spending a lot more to find some solutions for the problems we're gonna have then, and we're not gonna have an option to expand what we've built, and I'm not comfortable with that. So I appreciate the work you guys have done to come up with this better price, but
Can I offer
Just,
this?
just a quick answer. We didn't have the votes.
I know.
So, I have residents there that this winter, I'm gonna be putting blankets between their windows so the snow doesn't blow in. Okay, and we have no air conditioning. I approached the commissioners and said to them, we don't have the votes to pass $170 million project, even though we believe it's better. And we believe it becomes a 50-year project that is much cheaper now than what it will cost if the expansion has to be done. And I think nobody would disagree with that. The question is, do we let our residents suffer longer because we don't have the votes for the project? Or do we bring back at least something that will take care of them? I know it's a few years down the road, I get it, but it all starts on the first day. And do we, that was our choice. We sit there and say 170 million or nothing. Or do we understand what the delegation's been telling us? And that is that we're not gonna vote for that. And then try and bring back an altered project. And the only thing to cut is expandability. The George's concept of, and it's not just George's concept, it's the commissioner's concept, it's everybody's concept of building something like Riverside lasted us 50 years, building something that'll last, that'll be a legacy, and last for the next 50 years. But if we don't have the support to do that, then I can't have my residents, it's really hard to explain to families why it's snowing in a resident's room. Because the windows don't match up. And I mean, do we spend $1 million in new windows? That might, we don't even know if we could get them, because it'd have to be the exact same size. Because if we disturb the window frame, we're in now to asbestos abatement.
Yeah.
And we have PCBs in the caulking of the windows. So, I mean, it would cost millions of dollars just simply to replace the windows. Because we'd have to abate the PCBs. Not only that, we couldn't have residents in those rooms. So.
We can't tinker with that building.
Yeah, but what I'd like to, what, we've been spending a lot of time on the put together of the building. Could we spend at least just a few minutes on offsetting revenues from the new building that Brand has worked tirelessly over, that might make a lot of people feel better? Because, during the electoral campaign, there was word out there that we were gonna have a 30% tax increase as a result of this building. And I would like to be able to tell you, or I'd like to be able to at least recognize Brianna and the work that she's done in offsetting revenue that can be generated from the new building. And I'd like to do it while Professor Soloway's sitting here, so that he can nod his head at her calculations. Because I think, I mean, this has been, no offense, this has been your life. And so, I mean, it's not just our estimations. I mean, it's something that you can verify because it's what you've done for at least a couple of years.
Well, one of the reasons I agreed to have this workshop and have this vote next week is because this delegation and this executive committee have been wrestling with this problem for 6 months. We already know a lot of stuff. We also know some things that we don't know. But I think that if we have to kind of start all over again with the new delegation, we've missed a chance to at least get into this with this group. So that's the reason I've agreed to this. Peter and then.
So I just want to stress that not everyone on the delegation is committed to reducing the price at the expense of having this be a 50-year project as opposed to a 25-year project.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I think that the expandability is critical, and I think that it is the fiscally sensible thing to do, because it's going to cost a whole lot more to expand, and we're likely to need to expand if we only design for 25 years.
My worst nightmare, by the way, is then we're gonna have a split vote. And my job, piece of my job is to put out information and hope that the delegation agrees with the commissioner's concept. If we have a split vote, if the votes that we've had when the $170 million project was proposed, if we lose those votes and we continue to have votes against $139 million project, then the project's dead in the water. And I honestly don't know, what to do from there. I'll depend on the knowledge from, and direction that I get from the commissioners. So what you're saying is my worst nightmare, in terms of from an operational
Right,
standpoint.
so.
And that's why I think it's important that we give Brianna her chance to put forward the revenue estimates that might make you all feel better about the revenue that can be generated from a new building that we can't do now, and why we can't do it. And that she's worked tirelessly on in between keeping us COVID free. And I think that might at least suggest to people to think in a different direction.
Can I make
and,
one
uh,
request then?
Sure.
In considering the potential revenues, address any revenues that we have failed to get if we go with the 140 versus the 170.
We'll see if we can't do that now, we'll certainly have it ready for Monday.
Thank you.
And,
Brianna,
one thing, consideration. One consideration is we have to provide this service, no matter what, so even if we come up with a plan that doesn't work, we have to come up with another plan, so this isn't like the private sector, we're not Elon Musk, where if his great plan for Twitter doesn't work out, he can just turn off the servers and, we'll have to make do without Twitter. This is a service that, well, the county's legally provided to, make it available to the, seniors of the community, and even if we don't stop, somebody has to do it, so like it isn't. If we're taking care of our elders, it's not optional, like that's one of the reasons why private sector can do things a little more cheaply than the public sector, and that's just a fact of life to how we do business. So,
If we could recognize,
that's true. We're here, but
Thank you.
you're on, young lady.
Thank you. What I've taken from a lot of the conversations that have been had regarding this building isn't necessarily, yes, $170 million is a sticker shock. I understand that. And it hasn't necessarily, there's been a handful of individuals who have said, let's try and bring that cost down. But the majority of what I've taken from it is how are we going to pay for this without taxpayer impact? And so what I've presented to you here is what I've gone through, and I did a 2015 to a 2019 averages. These numbers are going to be averages that in front of you. With that 20,
Excuse me, we have copies. of
I'm sorry,
something?
you got this one here, I'm sorry.
You have it, right?
it came with,
They were all-
Okay.
Looks like this.
Kind of a table thing?
Yeah.
looks like this.
Yeah, I got it somewhere.
No, I thought I had someone.
Right,
there.
Brianna,
Yeah. I got it somewhere, but-
looks like this.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Got it. Thank you.
So what you have in front of you, I've used Riverside Restrooms 2015 to 2019 revenues. I have missing from this list, and you'll see that in the 7.259 million, those averages not accounted for in the resident income. Those are going to be items such as miscellaneous income. I didn't factor in our Hyder House operations and incomes there. And others such as the meal income, the electricity income that you'll find in some of the budget lines. That's what that average of that 7.259 is. What I've done is broken down the occupancy rate for the payer source of the individual that we've been providing care to. With the current structure that we have, we are missing huge revenue opportunities with Medicare Part A or skilled care, that short-term rehab care. We're also missing huge private pay dollars. A lot of what is happening now, because we don't have the facility, so we don't have the equipment, so we don't train the staff to provide those services, is if someone goes to the hospital and they require IV medications when they return, they go to Dover Rehab. Those are Medicare Part A dollars, those are federal dollars that are going to Dover Rehab. Once they've exhausted their benefit with Dover Rehab, they'll come back to us on those Medicaid dollars. The difference between, and I put the average daily rate, or the average rate you'll see towards the middle of that first column. Those are the average reimbursement rates that we have received for each individual payment source. That being said, if you look at our Medicare A, which is our skilled care, between 2015 and 2019, our average occupancy there was 0.4%, which is staunchly lower than you'll see with national averages. The national average was 14.56. Looking at the information I gathered from the National Investment Center, they do an annual skilled nursing facility data reports, which is the occupancy versus rates to find averages. The way those trends have been going, even since 2018, they've been trending down. To more realistically think that a 12% occupancy for your Part A benefit, that's more realistic. The low and high projections you'll find on the next page, you'll see that I didn't even put that 12% in there. I lowballed those numbers. The reason these numbers are what they are is I'm a glass half empty type of gal. So I'd rather tell you or project revenues that will likely be lower because I don't have those exact reimbursement costs right now. Those projected highs that you're seeing for potential revenues are conservative and I think obtainable. Those projected lows are really a worst case scenario. With that, again, I think you'll see the Medicaid, the Medicare Part A, those percentages of occupancies are where you're gonna see those changes. We're missing a huge demographic with a different building. And I know everyone here agrees we need a new building, but at what price are we paying for that new building? With just these projected lows using averages from 2015 to 2019 prices, which we all can agree probably at this table, those reimbursement rates will increase, but I don't want to provide you falsely high numbers. With those changes and just what we are gearing towards for that demographic is the difference between, that paper. It's roughly, my projected low is about $6.6 million more than what we've seen from the 2015 to 19. And my projected highs are about 9.4 million dollar difference in between 2015 to 2019. I use those years because once COVID hit across the nation, to use any numbers that happened after 2019 is just going to artificially inflate or deflate any of the numbers provided here. With that being said, with the offsets from the jail bond being paid off, from other bonds retiring, that's going to add another 3.4 to be able to go into offset the cost of the bond moving forward. If we were able to bond even for that 170 million. The difference between $139 million bond and $170 million bond for that first bond payment is 2.1 million.
For the first year.
For the first year, correct.
And then it goes down from there.
With that being said, if we're able to provide those services, even at my projected lows here, with the other offsets of the other bond retirements, that puts us at roughly $10 million, which is covering it. The projected highs are just shy of $12.8 million difference. That being said, looking at potential increases, well, it would definitely be an increase in our expenditures, but also an increase in our revenues. By looking at that, we stay in the same percentage of what we've been able to stay in from 2015 to 19, and those are just the years I'm pulling here. We will be able to stay in the same percentage of operating cost to revenue that we've been able to stay in. So that's why the taxpayer won't see a significant change in building the $170 million building from what we're currently operating. It's the population that we're able to meet the needs of that we are missing huge demographics for. Private pay dollars, because of the facility, the way it sits, we don't, very rarely do we get private pay dollars. I know we have that 10, I have 10, roughly 10% here of what we've been able to do for private pay dollars. Our private pay rate right now is
280.
right, but it's about $170 less per day than other county nursing homes are charging for their private pay rates. Other county homes are able to charge between that $330 and $350 private pay rate. That, you know, in agreement with Administrator Brown and the commissioners to try and charge that rate for the facility that we're able to provide. And it's not necessarily the care, but when you walk into a building, it is the building that you're looking at. The $450, again, we're looking at projections for potential private pay. That's not unrealistic to think in 2025, that might be the private pay rate. That 237 that you're looking at for a Medicaid reimbursement, that's the national average from 2015 to 19. It's gonna go up. That was not our average, because again, the services that you're providing within your building go into something called a case mix index, which is your acuity level, which then stems off your reimbursement rate, which is why our reimbursement rate is much lower than you're going to find in somewhere such as Hillsborough. Their size, the services that they can provide, the skilled care that they do brings in a higher level of acuity, so their Medicaid reimbursement rate is increased from there. So what I wanted to do is at least show you that I truly believe that these are very, very conservative numbers in my projections here. I think the highs are even conservative. Just based on what services we should be able to provide in a new building at the $170 million, I think we'll be able to offset that bond, no problem, when it comes to patient incomes. I do want to touch upon what Representative Kittredge had mentioned regarding talking about housing. And I agree. Yes, I think we're going to see an increase in the healthcare industry, but you know, the age populations show that there's going to be a decrease. By building this building staff efficient, I think during the tour, some of the individuals that came for the tour would have seen, you're standing at the nurse's station, you can see down both ends of a hallway, but once you cross over or you go towards where they're eating, now you have huge blind spots. It creates the need to staff more, or more individuals needing for staffing for that sufficient care. I do think that there is a need for affordable housing, but that's part of one of the legs of the stool that are part of that concept that I don't even want to talk about necessarily, because my focus for you folks is to show you that just the nursing home itself, without the other legs here, we will be able to provide services that bring in that revenue. I think it's unwise to cut out the expandability. I think by doing that basement area and not defining what it is right now is where we do get to look into the opportunities, because hopefully, as the rumblings go, there'll be changes into what we're able to do to provide for childcare too, because some of those services within a long-term care facility, you can't right now. So hopefully some of those bills will change, and if there is rumbling that will. So some of that basement can be affordable childcare, because that's one of the biggest things that keep people out of working right now, is if one person can bring home that income. Once you have more than 2 children, the average income right now, it doesn't make sense to work. So if we're able to do affordable childcare in some of those places, but by having that basement not in basement, I think there's a walkout the way the grade would be, but by having that basement area being able to change with the times. Right now, it's affordable housing and childcare. Tomorrow's needs could be something completely different. By being able to bring in services for the community, the adult daycare centers, the outpatient services that our therapy department, which we already staff this therapy department, but we don't have the means to be able to provide those outpatient services right now. With this building, the $170 million, we will be able to provide that. That's going to actually increase your Medicare Part B revenues that you're able to bring in, some more telehealth that you're able to bring in. As you'll notice in some of my projections, the Medicare, I don't have a Medicare Part B in some of those projections because I can't tell you what that would be, because I don't have a history of, I didn't want to come to you with a arbitrary number, because I don't have a history of the services we've provided and what we've been able to generate, because we haven't provided those services, generated those. Those are potentials. Again, I wanted to give you the very basic just with those 215 beds, the population within that new building that we'll be able to serve will be able to bring in increased revenue, which will keep taxpayer contributions to this project not, I don't want to say non-existent, because all of it's gonna be taxpayer dollars, right, at the end of the day. But you're not gonna see that huge county tax increase that I think a lot of people are concerned about. The census, the staffing, it's the staffing efficiencies. It's the ability to utilize that space and to provide what people need at the time, and not necessarily just what the residents need or the aging population need at the time, but the services that the workforce need at the time. I think eliminating that is unwise. I don't want to sit in this room in 30 years and ask for another building. Or someone else have to do it. But I truly believe that, again, I just keep talking in circles here now. I really think that we can bring in that revenue based on the services that we will have the ability to provide that aren't staunchly above and beyond what we're capable of doing now. But we can't do it now with the facility layout, with the staffing inefficiencies, and without the equipment.
Any infection issues and the size of the rooms for the bariatric population.
Okay, so you've been very patient to listen. So let's take on some of the questions you started. Janet, you had your hand up.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I thank everyone who's spoken here, and thank you, Ray, thank you. Representative Fargo, thank you, and Representative Soloway, that was very valuable information. Everything we've heard today, the kind of details we needed in the beginning before any vote was ever taken. I personally am not satisfied with hearing that, oh, people are gonna automatically vote no. They're voting no on old information that was inadequate, that was not complete. This is much more detailed, and we had some really important comments made today. I'm not satisfied with 130 million or whatever this figure is today, because we're eliminating the importance of real fire safety with only having that one-way access lane. Okay, so the courtyards are gonna be open. Okay, fresh air is a good thing. I don't have too much of a problem with that. Kitchen equipment, we haven't done a lot of replacement of equipment at Riverside over the years. From time to time, we do something. So I will rely on Brianna and Ray on that one. Security system, well, let's keep our fingers crossed. Future expansion is critical. I think we need to plan for future. I know we need to plan for future expansion. And this whole concept of geothermal, don't get defensive about it. It's important. It's going to save us money in the long run. It's going to save us real money. And I have friends and neighbors who have geothermal heating, and I know businesses that have gone with it. Yeah, it costs money up front, but by golly, it works. If you're not willing to go with 170 million, we've got to come up with some compromise, because this current figure today is inadequate from these points we were given us today. And we need to plan for the future. I mean, the future is coming really, really fast. When I think of my own life and how fast the years are gone, it's a little scary. And we've got to realize that there are a lot of people out there. The population in the county is growing. And it's not just the elderly population, it's the overall population. We need to do what we need to do. And I personally will strongly support still 170 million. But if we can't get that, I can't go down to 130. We've got to do something for a compromise, at least, the very least.
Okay, Mike.
I had a question for you. I'm just trying to, you gave us a lot of information there. And I know you put a lot of work into this, but I think,
you wanna scale it back?
at least this is what I think I heard in the summary. You're saying that if we go with the 170 million, that the carrying cost for the bond for that, if you subtract from that carrying cost what we now pay for the jail, because that's gonna go away, and you subtract the projected revenue, which I'll say is gonna be a lot larger under the new facility, that's gonna equal somewhere around payments of 36 million, which is what we pay now in taxes adjusted for inflation.
I think yeah.
So basically you say no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. If, other than it being adjusted for inflation, of course, if this was passed.
That's what I anticipate with the revenue that will be over.
And one of, this follow up on that,
Please.
all these revenue figures that you have on here,
Mhm.
is it assuming, like, right now, I think it's 70% occupancy or something like that, it's about as high as we can go. This is assuming 100% occupancy in the new facility?
It's not, so if you look
No.
at the projected low, I'm sorry. And it is a lot of information, and actually for Monday, I will work with some of these notes here to try and scale back some of these numbers, because there's a lot of numbers on this sheet. If you look where it says low census, that 194.
90 and 97 of the two things then, and can just don't go into a real explanation, but it appears that you're saying there's a lot of things that the nursing home doesn't offer now, so a lot of this Medicaid A or private pay, they just don't come here.
Yes.
Because, and while under the new facility will be offering, we buying a lot of new equipment, we having better trained people, or I don't understand. why-
Single bedrooms is a big one.
It makes a huge difference, and it really does. And that's where I know a lot of individuals have also said continuing to do that semi-private, it makes a huge difference when you're talking about the short-term
So this
rehab.
is people making the choice saying, I'll go someplace else because they don't offer single rooms.
Well, it's not the single room, it's infection control measures that can get that reimbursement. You can't claim that someone is on isolation when they're sharing a room.
Okay.
So you can't do it that way. IV medications, oxygen tubing, those are all huge trip hazards when you start to share a room. IV meds, we don't do at the nursing home. So like that has been the biggest sticking point for me over the last 10 years to see it, because someone goes out with an infection, they need IV antibiotics, well, they're not staying at the hospital. They go over to Dover Rehab. Dover Rehab does their skilled benefit. They get that higher reimbursement. And then they exhaust their time, because there's a time frame which you're gonna be on that, or you're entitled to that benefit. And then they come back to us on those Medicaid dollars, because those aren't things that we offer.
What if they, how can they come back if they still need whatever they were getting?
It's once it's exhausted there, so like they don't need it anymore is when they come back to us.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so Dover Rehab gets 300 and it's not even 300 anymore. It's about $450 to $700 a day, depending on the services they're provided. Then they come back to us and we get the 180.
And so the example is on the skilled service, the person that it's based on your overall condition. So the fact that you need to be in a nursing home to start with actually promotes the rate in the facility like Dover Rehab. So it's not like, let's just use me. I need a new hip. Okay, I'm delaying it till, because I want to get the budget through, I want to go beyond budget time. So I keep getting injections in my hip, and maybe in April I can get a new hip. But if I needed to go into a nursing home for rehabilitation, for rehab, okay. They're not gonna make a ton of money from me, because I'm otherwise healthy. However, if you take somebody that's already been nursing home approved, because they have deficiencies in their activities of daily living already, and then then it's added to because they need rehab for a new knee or a hip replacement, or their reimbursement is $600, $700, $800 a day. Where mine might be like $200 a day. Because I'm otherwise healthy. So those are the people that we're losing. They're our own people. And then when they come back to us, we continue whatever therapy, or if it was therapy, we continue the therapy, but they're used up their time at higher reimbursement levels in other facilities. And that's hurt our revenue stream. And
Just one second. So it was mentioned earlier, that, we, I just lost my train of thought. That,
we have a wing for you.
Well, I guess it depends on Monday.
I may get two wings at any time. I'll come back because I don't want to.
Professor
Go
Sal.
ahead, Jeff.
Brianna, thank you very much for all the work that you put into it. I think you're wrong. I think that you've been very, very conservative, very conservative. And though you've done your work as an administrator, our county delegation is wicked smart. And they're gonna look at the nursing home and say, we're gonna work like Toyota works. So we're gonna say, you've got right now 3 pots of money coming in. You've got Medicaid, you've got Medicare A, and you've got private pay. Okay, so you have three lines. Now, your Medicaid is your Toyota Corolla line, and you don't make beans on that. You barely cover your costs, okay? And we're not gonna increase that dramatically. We're never gonna get more money out of the state or the feds on Medicaid. Okay, we understand that. Your Medicare Part A is your Camry line. And this is where you're getting a fair amount of revenue, and that's probably going to go up, especially as you add medical competency, medical complexity. And you're gonna get more reimbursement, and I think you've underestimated the amount of reimbursement that you're gonna get. Okay. Now, they think like Toyota. And they say, oh, what about if on private pay, we offer what the customer really wants, and that's Avalon. We're gonna offer some of the luxuries. We're gonna offer the IV services. We're gonna offer all the services that basically put us in competition with high-end rehab facilities, and we can make a lot of money doing that. I think you've underestimated that. Now, they think like Toyota. And they say there's another potential source of revenue out there, and that is Medicare Part B. And we don't have it.
No.
So we're gonna open up a line called Lexus. And that's gonna be Medicare Part B, and we can staff it, we can hire it, we can contract for it, and we can make a bundle out of it. And we can cover all the bonding costs and all the construction costs for a first-class facility because we're wicked smart.
Absolutely. These are extremely conservative.
I asked her, honestly speaking, when we started this, we didn't know how the numbers were gonna turn out. You know, I mean, it looks, some people who might think, that, you know, we're doing this to show that it offsets the bond. We didn't, these numbers drive themselves. I mean, we didn't make these numbers up. You know, these are verifiable numbers. So you know, it turns out that it's a little, it comes in at an excess of the bonding cost. You know, we didn't know that when we started. You know, we know that now because, you know, 95% of this is Brianna, 5% of it's the rest of us. You know, just going over things like I helped Brianna a little bit with what other bonds we were gonna retire, you know, things like that. But the hard work in this was hers, you know, and she deserves 100% credit for this.
Well, I think the National Investment Center did more work.
But the bottom line is you were smart enough to go to the National Investment Center and find it. And, you know, you were smart enough to use, you know, non-COVID years and, you know, so we had comparisons and you were smart enough to build in a cost increase year by year, you know, for operating. So it's not just all, you know, revenue, even though the projection would be, the revenue would be, you know, probably grow at a greater rate. And I think that's, you know, my fault for, perhaps this is something that should have been presented earlier on. Instead of, but you know, you throw a concept out and you learn from the questions. You know, you learn what concerns people that don't agree with the project that you want to do, and then you provide them that information and hope that they reconsider. So
My thought has come back to me, and that is when the architect was talking to us about the room of the future that we saw the picture of, right? Single bed, a window. These are our current federal requirements that are being phased in all over the country, right? So we are facing a situation with a nursing home that we currently have does not meet those requirements.
Well,
In so many ways-
we're already out of compliance in a whole bunch of
Well,
different
that's the
things.
point I'm making, and Cliff has referenced this a number of times, that you can't, and we really cannot tinker with the current building because of the PCBs, the asbestos and so forth. So we are going to have to get a new nursing home, right? And the facility that, that you showed us in these pictures and so forth is a facility that we should be providing for our residents with decent human conditions. But also the requirements are coming at us. So,
It's
I think
not
we
their
have-
fault, they're sick and poor.
And what we're doing now is we are looking at a lot of the facts. Mike is a numbers maven, and I think that's a good word. And this is the kind of thing that we need to do, is really look at this and think it through with regard to what Brianna's come up with. Numbers that are real, that tell us what we can do without soaking our taxpayers. Cliff is not gonna vote for, frankly, none of us want either. We can't soak the taxpayers. So anyway, sorry, Tim, go ahead. I've said my piece.
I mean, I think there's a school of thought.
No, Tim Fonda.
That's about it. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add, thank you for the conservative estimates, because I appreciate that. Supplemental. To find out that, oh, the thing we approved for you last year is now gonna cost 30% more, and we don't have enough money to build it, and et cetera. So I mean, none of us want to get into that. I was in favor of the $170 million project, because I thought it was forward thinking, and I trusted that the commissioners and the administration, when they said they thought they could pay for it with these improvements. However, I appreciate this new proposal as well, and I personally am not going to throw out the good in search of the perfect. I think the $170 million project was my dream home. $140 million project will satisfy. I'm going to support whichever one we go forward with. What I would like to see is maybe a couple of options in there, like, because the expandability is important to me as well.
And it makes perfect sense.
I'd like to see them as options, as an a la carte thing. Okay, here's a $140 million project. What if I want to add those foundations back in? What's the cost of that? What's the cost per square foot for that space we're gonna get?
We'll have that for you for Monday.
Is it worthwhile? Same thing with the road. What's the difference between a 12-foot and a 20-foot road?
Right.
If we have those as a la carte options, maybe we'll support them, maybe we won't at the time. Same with the geothermal, for me, is one that kind of has to be explored as you go, because I think my opinion is that you're gonna save money on the geothermal, maybe.
Well, you have to do the drilling and find out. what
You
have
don't
to-
know. That's right.
The other one piece is, remember that part of the revenue that we're proposing is the reimbursement from the state. And Professor Soloway gave me a hard time about this in a joking way when we took over Hyder. Because then we began to depreciate Hyder without paying for it. So there, well, it worked. It worked. It's legal. It's perfectly legal. So, an investment on the front end, can be offset, over a portion of it can be offset because it becomes a capital investment, which is part of the Medicaid reimbursement from the state. So it's not, if there is some offset to spending a little more money on upfront for capital investment, then it's not just, oh, well, it's gonna take you 20 years to make the money back. There is a continual capital reimbursement for that. So, I mean, that's just a piece of information that needs to be factored in.
Right, but I think that also can come as we go forward.
Well, we're not voting right now.
No, I understand that.
So we have a lot of additional information to consider and for you guys to work on. And Joe, you had your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
ICF, did you look into, the building, using ICF?
It's a possibility. I mean, what is that?
What would it save?
ICF is
Insulated concrete
foams,
forms.
forms that you use to build foundations. I'm sorry, your point.
Right, well, would it be cheap? Would you be saving energy in the long run by using ICF?
Not necessarily, because even if you form a foundation, we're gonna do insulation on the outside of the wall, so. Honestly, the bigger issue in that is, can we find a concrete contractor to do the job? Where ICFs are done by